So let's get to some football notes. Utah wide receiver Dorian Singer saying that Cam Rising will play at Oklahoma State. This is not a surprise. It's a very big game. Obviously, if he couldn't play, he couldn't play, and Utah's dealt with that before, including last week. But Cam Rising, according to his teammate and wide receiver Dorian Singer, will play in what is one of the better games in the country this weekend in Stillwater, Oklahoma.
Yeah, that's good news. I mean, not surprising. I mean, they didn't need him against Utah State, sat him, let the finger get healed up a little bit, and now he can roll back out there against Oklahoma State in the Grandpa Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, this is very much the Grandpa Bowl. I know that you guys probably saw that graphic out there about the combined age. And, I mean, that's a unique matchup that I don't know how many will get like that with two guys as old as these two quarterbacks are. But I'm glad that we're getting it. I'm glad that we're getting it with Cam Rising in the fold, because otherwise this would not be the game that it needs to be to figure out who the better team is and to determine the Big 12 standings the way that they could be at their very best. So, yeah, I would have hated this game had it not been Cam Rising, and all due respect to young Wilson or who else they might have thrown out there, but wanted to see Bowman versus Rising, so this is good news. And I guess he got some stitches, and that injury wasn't all that serious after the sideline hit against Baylor, so I'm glad for that as well, that didn't turn it into anything more serious. But this is the last time we'll see this matchup ever, unless these guys are magically going to play until they're 40. But they could, I guess, always meet in the Big 12 championship game. But this will be a big game in getting either one of these teams to that contest at the end of this year.
All right, Garrett, speaking of the one that Craig just alluded to on the age of the quarterbacks between Utah and Oklahoma State, the average age, the combined age is 49. The combined age of the starting quarterbacks in Sunday's game with the Colts and Bears was 44. So, yeah, these are two veterans, so to speak, in college football lore. And Cam Rising, who started at Texas, has been at Utah quite some time. And then Bowman, of course, Texas Tech, Michigan, and now has been at Oklahoma State. So a pretty cool number, 49 years old, the combined age.
It's cool. It's also not so cool. Like, I think it's great, and I understand COVID years and all that, but I don't know about you guys. Like, I mean, respect to those players. This is probably going to be the last football they truly ever play, because I don't know, if you're an NFL prospect, you're probably in the league like 3 years ago. I know health has played a factor as well, but I know college football is a quirky game, but I don't love nearly 30-year-old quarterbacks squaring off with each other when there's younger players that can be in the mix. You know what I mean? So I'm cool with it this year, but I hope that's not a trend that we see all that often moving forward, and this is the last time a record like that's set for a while.
Yeah, it's, when Miami has the 9th-year tight end and, you've got 7-year players. I mean, it's just not college football that way to me anymore. And also, I don't think it's going to be the trend overall. I do think we're going to get to a place where instead of 4 years to play 5, you might have 6 years to play 5. But I don't think 7 is going to be a sustainable number. But all at the end of it, yeah, I'm with you, Craig. I would rather just see guys move on after 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, it's hey, good for them, and they were part of the COVID stretch, and they've had their share of injuries. So it's nothing against Bowman or Rising. I'm not going to be a fan of college football if this is a regular occurrence, if that makes sense, which is going to be hard for it to be because we'd need like another wave of COVID, but or something along those lines. But yeah, this is a unique matchup in that way, and hopefully, the oldest that we get for a while.
So there we are with that. And by the way, I can't wait for that game in Stillwater. Should be a fantastic atmosphere. Meanwhile, Kansas is trying to pick themselves off the map. Jeff Grimes, who was at BYU, obviously was at Baylor, and now he's at Kansas. A couple of different comments, Matt Tate, with this. First of all, Grimes said he met yesterday with a specific group of leaders. KU, of course, has lost a couple of games in a row. Offense has just not been getting things done. Talked about how the Illinois loss might not have been rock bottom and that they might have to get all the way to the bottom and refocus get going in the direction they need to go. He also further clarified he was referencing the outcome of UNLV as being rock bottom. The climb back starts now. To that end, several KU players saying today practice was one of their best and accountability was also both high and also done with greater extent. And it does look like Grimes will be flipping from on the field up into the box. That appears to be more likely than not. So KU trying to figure out what has happened to what was such a season, still can be, but with so many and high expectations.
Yeah, by the way, I've got surprisingly good Kansas sources now on things when they tell me about, hey, he's going to move up to the box and all these other things. They wind up turning out. But I think they're going to be, if he doesn't get better, they're going to be pushed to a situation where he's just the offensive line coach or something like that and not the play caller anymore, or assistant head coach offense, but the play calling is going to go back to somebody else. So this team does not look the same as it did last year. Andy Kotelnicki, one of the best hires of the offseason for Penn State. That means you have a gap that you have to fill.
Yeah, I don't think KU fans are really too interested in hearing much from Jeff Grimes. They want to see it out on the field. I feel like they've already kind of made up their minds that they're not real thrilled with what they've seen, and they're not real thrilled about that being the case the rest of this way. So KU's got to find some new ways to get some offense generated. It doesn't help that Jalen Daniels is not quite what he was when we saw him at his peak a couple of years ago. It's understandable, but it's also the reality that you went into this season, and part of the reason, at least I thought that KU should be positioned towards the top of the rankings was based on two major factors, and that was their weak schedule, which is still mostly in front of them, but also their status at quarterback and whether or not Jalen Daniels would be fully healthy or not, and he's still working his way back, but also the change at OC. You're seeing that rear its head as well. We've talked about that quite a bit. So, yeah, it's an adjustment period, and we'll see if Grimes can get it on track, and if not, then I wouldn't be surprised if, like Paul said, we hear something about, Leipold's calling plays or having more of a fingerprint on the offense. But, yeah, it's a very rocky start for Jeff Grimes in Lawrence, Kansas.
Jalen Daniels is completing just 55% of his passes. He has 6 interceptions and 3 touchdowns. He's also been sacked 3 times. That's not really a lot when you've played 3 games, and you've played a couple of pretty good teams, as we know, in both Illinois and also UNLV. They've run the ball over 200 yards a game, which you'd think they could probably even get better at that with what they have, despite Highshaw missing the game last week. But Jalen Daniels, a 3-to-6 ratio, touchdowns to interceptions, is not going to make it no matter who the offensive coordinator might be. Let's go to one note. The Earl Campbell Tyler Rose Award went to UT's Arch Manning, who came in after Texas had jumped out to a lead with Quinn Ewers, who had that abdominal strain, and then Manning went off. And I talked to a guy that does some national podcast earlier today, and he said the thing that blew him away, he knew he could throw it, but was the 67-yard run that a lot of people even saw a glimpse of that last year when he got a chance to play at the end of the year.
Yeah, I mean, Arch is a great athlete. That was evident by that run, and I think that woke a lot of people up that maybe hadn't watched much of his game or just were expecting him to be a carbon copy of his uncles or whatever the expectation might have been. They were huge, and they were all over for Arch Manning because he is unlike really many, if any, types of players we've seen in terms of star power before they ever even had their first snap. There's highly rated 5-star recruits, and then there's highly rated 5-star recruits with that type of background and family connections and just flat-out star power. I mean, you see it through social media that he was already tweeting one time on his account and getting tens of thousands of impressions, and he's just a guy who's got a whole solar system revolving around him, and you would have thought the whole college football universe was centered, in that game on Saturday because everybody was seemingly watching Arch Manning, and not just watching, but completely gobsmacked by how good and how quickly he was making an impact in that game. And so, yeah, he's very deserving of that. I mean, look at the stats, but go look at the situation, go look at the execution, and he definitely has some help on some of those touchdowns, like, guys taking it the distance. But I'm not taking away from him at all. He was great, and he deserves that honor this week. And he was a guy that I think you were hoping to see live up to that potential because it's just so hard for guys to live up to billing like that. And so for him to be able to do that, at least in this first game, was pretty cool.
He was spectacular. And my goodness, UT's in really good hands no matter what with Ewers and Arch. And then, as Craig said yesterday, the next 10 years or so. We have discussed Kansas, in fact, earlier on the show today and yesterday, and we have discussed West Virginia and the meltdown in the last 5 minutes in the loss to Pittsburgh. That has been discussed on this show as we go in. That's why the idea by Craig, and we have the pod this week, or today, excuse me, we broke the Big 12 into 4 pods of 4, and today it is pod 1 is what we refer to it: Texas Tech, TCU, Oklahoma State, and also Baylor. But along the way, we have guests from those, and analysts, and even coaches. We will have that as well.
Yeah, I mean, we mentioned earlier that clearly there's a Jeff Grimes and Jalen Daniels problem in Lawrence, Kansas right now. And, I mean, we can get a little bit deeper into it than that, and kind of did. But I think we hit the high points. They are not as good on offense as they expected to be post Andy Kotelnicki, and many, including myself, not toot my own horn, but just figured that was going to be the case, because you don't just trade out a great OC and automatically get a great OC in return, especially when we've seen said OC and saw him the last 3 years here, and it wasn't great. Hardly ever, if even once. So I just figured Jeff Grimes going in there was not going to be as good or as dynamic as Andy Kotelnicki. And then there was the other question about, well, how healthy is Jalen Daniels really? And based on what we've seen, he's rusty. He's not all the way to where he was at his peak, and he's having a real hard time with this offense right now. Not in terms of running the offense, but just it's different than what he was doing when he was going crazy. And it's also 2 years after the fact. And so it's not the same Jalen Daniels. And so for Kansas, those are really kind of the big bullet points right now. And so we have discussed those and now discussed them again. But we'll get more into the pods. And then for West Virginia, I mean, we talked about it a little bit yesterday. That was a god-awful loss. That was a terrible loss. And it's not putting Neil Brown directly back on the hot seat, but pretty close to it. It's pushing him back in that direction. He got himself a little bit of goodwill last year, but you start off 1-2 and you don't go improve in the Big 12. That's just going to have everybody back on the other side of the fence where they were prior to that great run last year. So that's not really a place you want to be. You've got a new AD there in Ren Baker, who's been very supportive of Neil Brown. So I, again, don't think you're like waiting for the call that he's gone anytime soon, but I do think it's an unexpected curveball if you're a West Virginia fan who maybe you were or were not bought in last year, and then by the end of the year you were probably bought in, or even if you were you're like, well, it's better I support this than I don't support it, even if I still don't think Neil Brown's the guy, because at least it's going a direction. Mm-hmm. And then this year it's going backwards. And so that's a hard pill to swallow, and they have not been as good as you thought they might be. So we'll see. It's 3 weeks in, but it's been a rougher 3 weeks than West Virginia anticipated. And unlike Kansas, the problem for them is that their schedule is amongst the toughest. KU's is amongst the easiest, on paper at least. We'll see if that continues, and that's actually something that holds true, but that's another West Virginia pickle that they could find themselves in, is the difficulty of the schedule.
Yeah, absolutely. Like Kansas is not the hardest part, but they had I think everybody was surprised at how good Illinois and tough they are.
That wasn't a loss you necessarily banked on, but you could kind of see the possibility.
And then, like, when you see UNLV and how good they've been under Barry Odom, like, that's a game where you have to take it seriously. So they had one of the better non-conference schedules, of their 3 non-con games than most people because of the teams they played. I don't think that was the plan when they scheduled Illinois and UNLV, but obviously they didn't expect to lose those 2 games in a row. But yeah, they're like, it's like looking at both these teams. You're like looking at them, and it's like they're the hologram version of themselves and not the actual version, where you can see like, oh, there's the shape of Kansas and West Virginia, and wow, that's neat that they have this light that shows it, but you can still kind of run right through it, and it's not really them.
Here's the other thing, and I know we'll get into pods, but whoever wins this game is going to feel pretty good because you both need a win. Whoever loses this game is in real danger of missing a bowl. I mean, real danger. KU didn't expect this first leg to be as difficult as it has been. I don't think anybody thought that they would be 1-2. Like, you can say, oh, I thought you'd lose to Illinois, but I don't think anybody said Illinois and UNLV and you'll be 1-2 before conference play starts. But you have a pretty difficult road. You got at West Virginia. You got TCU. They're tough. You got at Arizona State. That's better than expected already, and that's your next 3 weeks. And then you still got K-State and Iowa State and a BYU team that's better than what we thought they might be. And, who knows with Colorado and Baylor ultimately. So there's still room there, but you lose this weekend, you're suddenly starting to go, well, shoot, we got to go 5-4 down the stretch to make sure we win a bowl game. And if you're West Virginia, I think your schedule is way more difficult, and if you don't win this week, you're going to really find yourself in a tough stretch because you've got some ranked teams coming back to back to back in Oklahoma State, Iowa State, and Kansas State, 3 straight after this game this weekend. So this is a huge game for whoever emerges from this. They both need a win, and the team who is 1-3 is going to be in a real pickle.
I would love, Paul, have you done, and this is now, I'm telling you, a top 5 on the most difficult remaining schedules? Because we know what Florida has. Mm-hmm. Oklahoma is a battering ram with Tennessee coming up this weekend. Do it.
Yeah, maybe Thursday.
I'm telling you, just like today.
Well, it's already done today. Okay. It's already done today and tomorrow.
Tell me this: how many wins are coming for West Virginia here? Just real second.
Yeah, we don't.
All right, so we don't know. You're 1-2. You got Kansas coming up.
I think they'll win that game.
They're at Morgantown.
But toss up. Yeah. Still toss up.
Go to Stillwater.
That's not
now
great
that's
news.
after a bye week, so I'll just put that in there. But
Still
these games are all back to back to back. Stillwater back home to face Iowa State, and then you stay at home and you welcome in K-State. So at least you got them at home, but you got Oak State, Iowa State, K-State back to back to back, 3 weeks in a row. Then right after that, Arizona. Who knows with them?
If they get it together, the way they should be.
In Tucson, you go to Cincinnati. You should win that. But, you got Baylor, which, Baylor might be good. They might not be. We don't really know, but they at least showed some signs last week that they have some life. And then UCF, they might be in the conference championship game. And Texas Tech, that's going to be a tough out. And that's in Lubbock.
They finished well. Yeah, and it's in Lubbock.
So, if you're Neil Brown, it's a big game this weekend because you're already kind of behind it, and you can't really afford to start 1-3 with the entire schedule in front of you remaining. So, yeah, this is a very important game for both sides to just get a little bit of good morale going down this stretch.
All right, good stuff, Craig. Thank you very much. A couple other notes. The Max Bowl Award and also the Davey O'Brien Awards announcing their players of the week, and Alabama quarterback Jalen Milroe, who had kind of a dual threat game against Wisconsin. And Luke Fickell and the Badgers are trying to figure out what they do moving forward without their starting quarterback. And they were blitzkrieged by the Crimson Tide. So far, DeBoer, his teams look good. Thought that they've looked pretty good. And, of course, more tests. They have Georgia in a couple of weeks, too.
Wisconsin was a team I thought would be a bit farther along than they are at this point with Luke Fickell. They're kind of an afterthought, honestly. Probably not up north, but here they are. And I just thought that they'd be more in the mix than they are. It's been kind of surprising. But as far as Milroe goes, to go in at Camp Randall, that's still a big deal, no matter how good the Badgers are. And I think he's a great fit for what DeBoer does. And you've seen that in these first few games. He hasn't necessarily had super gaudy numbers, but he's been very efficient, very, very efficient, and hasn't had to go all 4 quarters and press the pedal to the metal like he'll have to do here in the coming weeks. But I do like what I've seen from them. It doesn't have that feeling of just dominance, though, like it did when Nick Saban was the head coach and you just knew they were the favorite in every game. And some of that's because Georgia's taken that out a little bit, but also just it being somebody other than Saban, as good as DeBoer is, it's just they don't feel unbeatable now like they used to. They're still very, very good, and I'm excited to see how Milroe continues to progress. And he was also part of the Earl Campbell Award, but with all due respect to Jalen Milroe, that nice day at Camp Randall, Wisconsin loses their starting quarterback before, it was a nice day. It was very efficient, like I said. What Arch Manning did was like Hollywood script writing. That was a Disney movie that we saw for Arch Manning. So I think he was deserving. But, yeah, Jalen's been good and excited to see what he continues to do.
Houston.
No, I agree. I think, Alabama, it's going to be, when they get into the teeth of the schedule, when these SEC teams in the top 7 that have all these, like, overlapping Venn diagram of games, we'll see how good they are. And
I tell you what, I thought they've looked pretty good for a coaching transition. Some players in and out. I think they look pretty good. That could have been an absolute, like, it took time to even find a flow, but I feel like they already have.
The biggest thing I think we'll see with Alabama is late in the season where attrition will get to everybody, where before Nick Saban was able to withstand attrition by just like putting another 5-star off the factory line. That's not necessarily the case right now at Alabama. Not that it won't get back there, but their depth was hurt by the transfer portal for the first time ever. So they'll see how the other half lives late in the season when they have some key injuries and somebody who's not ready to play steps up as opposed to a guy who's just there because, he's waiting his chance to go to the NFL.
TDECU Stadium, University of Houston, has been renamed because a renaming of a merger name, and it's now Space City Financial Stadium. That seems to be a hell of a lot easier for me to read, and I would think that's a lot easier for people to know what that means because it got to the point with the Alphabet Stadium name, but now Space City Financial Stadium. I think that UCF might have a lawsuit here.
No, they're the Space Coast.
I know, but they may want to go, wait a minute here. But both Houston and also you look at Florida on the East Coast, those are the rocket ship capitals of the United States.
We couldn't have done any of the NASA missions without either city. Mm-hmm. So, they can just agree to, when they do play each other, Houston and UCF, when those games come around, the winner gets the astronaut trophy and gets to hold it until the next time they play.
Yeah, I think it's way easier than saying TDECU. That just was kind of
It's clunky. A lot of letters.
Yeah, it's just clunky. So that was always kind of difficult to rattle off. I know you can't do this, but if you could drop the financial part, that would be a perfect name. Space City Stadium, like that would be perfect. But I know you got to get the name on there. So Space City Financial, that's what it is, right?
Yep.
That works. I mean, that's definitely smoother than TDECU. So yeah, that's a notable little thing that Houston's got going for it now, along with the fact that they feel a lot better about things than they did a couple weeks ago, and rightfully so. Willie Fritz has got a little bit of belief growing down there in Houston, and that's great to see. So hopefully they continue to get the external support, things like naming rights, because that's going to be key for them versus a lot of the other programs they face, since they don't have the big, huge endowment, like the backing like a lot of other schools do. I think it's imperative they create money somewhere, and so naming rights just makes a lot of sense.
So you didn't think that $20+ million revenue sharing that college football programs or university athletic programs were going to pass along to the players and student athletes was going to just be because they were going to lose $22 million a year, even with the money getting larger with the college football playoff expansion. So Tennessee, and we'll ask Mack Rhodes about this, is planning to add a 10% talent fee to all of their tickets. So who's going to pay for the revenue sharing?
That would be the fans. Would you like a pop quiz on how tariffs work? This is essentially a tariff on the fans because they've got extra cost. They're going to pass it on. Now, it's like a tax that you pass on to somebody. This is kind of a tariff on the fans, and they're going to say, hey, if you guys want to be good, but this is not new to sports. This is not new to sports. Professional sports has done this for years, and only a few places that I can think of, San Diego and Oakland, have had the balls enough to stand up to the rich guy and go, hey, you want a stadium, then you build it.
Yeah.
We don't get anything out of this. When we win the Super Bowl, none of us get rings.
They get a Super Bowl.
But none of them get rings.
Yeah.
Like if I live in Oakland and they built a new stadium and put the Super Bowl there, am I going to get a ring? Am I going to get any money off of that? No, probably not. And so this is just, a big brand, Tennessee, passing on cost to the consumer.
And on the other hand, if you don't do that, then what's the alternative? Oh, they take the team and they leave, and they go to Las Vegas or they go to Los Angeles. So, yeah, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. You're either spending money or your team leaves, which is pretty screwed up. But, I mean, I get it from Tennessee's perspective. They weren't going to not try to find more ways to make money and dip into their own pockets. I mean, they got to pay their quarterback $7 million or whatever it is after all. So they've got to keep raising more and more money. And what more American way than to pass it off to the everyday man and woman who are already probably stretching it in some cases. But, I mean, with that rabid fan base and the size of that fan base, I'm sure they'll be fine. But I'm not so sure how well that'll go over. Maybe other places where it'll be a bit more difficult to stretch a buck. But I get it. It's part of the deal. I think it sucks, though, because people are already pretty stretched out as it is. It reminds me of bills just randomly going up, during COVID. It's like, why? Nothing's changed. Oh, well, supply chain. We gotta, it's like now it's like, oh, we gotta pay the players. So now you gotta pay more. It's just how it works. And so Tennessee's just the first to get out in front of it, or one of the first.
Well, and even Danny White, the AD there, said that estimates the new roster caps included in the settlement, which is still not official, which would raise the number of athletic or available scholarships. The actual cost is going to be more like $30 million a year rather than $20 to $22 million a year starting during the school year of 25 and 26. Nebraska's Matt Rule, they host Illinois on Friday, and it's almost like two teams looking in the mirror, the way they play, the way those two coaches have coached over the years. He said that this is pretty interesting. I want to kind of have a takeoff with this. So there's a Big Ten coaches group chat. And Brett Bielema is the one that kind of started this because of his connections to the American Football Coaches Association and other entities in college football. And, of course, if you don't know, Craig Bull, as we mentioned earlier, the executive director, Grant Taft was, Todd Berry. It's like a mile and a half from where we are. So of the Big Ten coaches, Mitch Sherman then went on to say, of the Big Ten coaches, who's the coach who responds to every text? Who's the one that just sends memes? Who's the one who, if you were to have a group chat, have fun with this now. Somebody said to that, the one who would respond every time would be PJ Fleck.
Oh,
because
yeah.
he's on adrenaline rush 124 hours a day.
Yeah. No. He absolutely. Yeah, I think that I was going to say the one who would never respond to it would be Kirk Ferentz. And he would.
No, you know why? Because he didn't know how to use it. He would be
you
like. You can't text on a rotary phone.
Like, let's just say, I'm going to name his assistant, like his SID, Kip. I'm going to name Kip as the guy who's got to deal with Kirk Ferentz. And he's going to be like, Kip, get this shit to stop buzzing. Like, that's going to be his directive. Kip, why do I keep getting these messages from Brett Bielema? All that. Bielema, I think, would be, like, in the text or in the tweet, it says that he's kind of the godfather of the group chat, but Bielema's the one who's like the godfather, but there's going to be a guy in it who sends stuff that would, PJ Fleck to me would send motivational things and all that. He would maybe kind of take over that role. I think Lincoln Riley would be kind of the, like,
I don't think he's answering much.
I don't think he's answering much, like in that tweet. Deshaun Foster would probably be popping in going, hey guys, LA's cool. And they're like, whatever. Dan Lanning might just like send emojis.
Somebody responded by saying, would you please, my God, if it's in an app, let me know the app information. I want to be a part of that.
But like Dan Lanning would send like, hey guys, we're going to do this, this, and this at the coaches meeting. And he'll just send a thumbs up.
Yeah. Mitch Sherman also said that another question, if a coach is fired midseason or leaves, who's the one that removes the departing coaches? And
the one who started it.
The guy who started it, which would be Brett Bielema. So there's just a few things on that.
Yeah, I don't know, like, enough of their – I think you'd have to have, like, a Big Ten-specific podcast that really knows these characters inside and out to, like, better guess who would be who. Like, because I know Lincoln Riley a good bit, but I don't know like, David Braun very well in Northwestern. You know what I mean? Like – Kurt Signetti's interesting, but I'm still kind of learning a bit more about him. He seems to me like a guy who might be doing memes. I don't know, though. Like, but it's an eclectic group when you actually start to look at all the names, like Brett Bielema and Kirk Ferentz and Lincoln Riley.
James Franklin.
Matt Rule. Like, yeah, it's an interesting group for sure. And I wonder if other conferences have these big group chats. I like the idea, though. I think it's a cool idea, but I would absolutely, like somebody else said, love to download an app if you could to just – peek into the fishbowl, and especially after like a very contentious conference game, see what that's like. But yeah, that's interesting.
Here's one that's just a part of the responses to Mitch Sherman. Which assistant coach has to help Ferentz unlock his phone to read the text messages from the group chat.
It's Kip. It's poor Kip that works with him, and he'll just be like, Kip, and the Kip's going to come in like, what's up, coach? Yeah. And then he's going to say, I've got 25 text messages here. And he's like, don't worry about it. Well, it's from the group chat. They're not talking about your coach.
I think we're underestimating him. Remember, he got in trouble for a recruiting violation, so he might be able to text better.
I think that was in person, though. I think that was in person.
Carrier pigeon.
I'll tell you this, Matt Rule loves to text. He really does. Yeah. He is very much savvy when it comes to Twitter and also text messages.
You know, people still do that, Craig. Carrier pigeons.
Do they really?
Yeah, we had a neighbor, Mr. Nicosia, and he was in the Signal Corps in World War II, and he was a great guy. I miss him all the time, but he and my dad got close. And one summer when I was home, my dad said, you need to help Mr. Nicosia with his, kind of chores. And the chore was, and my dad, having the sense of humor he had, was helping him load the bird seed into his pigeon coop.
Oh, okay.
Is this why you're scared of birds?
No, that I was already scared of birds. That doubled it down.
Pigeons are such a strong that you get a handful of them.
Bird crap machines is what they are.
Oh, golly, I mean, there are certain places, and it hasn't that time of the year yet. When do the birds start to hammer HEB parking lot?
It's about a month from now.
Florida State has their offensive coordinator back, so they're fine. They will go on a run here. Alex Atkins served a 3-game suspension back on the sidelines against California this weekend.
Now, I do wonder, because their offensive line has played so terribly through the first 3 weeks, if having him there to yell at them in-game will help. But here's the thing that makes me mad about this, is this was one of the stupidest decisions the Florida State administration has done. If you'll remember, he was suspended because he drove a recruit to an NIL meeting, drove him in a car. Then 2 weeks later, the injunction gets filed because of the Nico Amaliava situation at Tennessee, where Nico Amaliava got in a private jet and flew to Tennessee to get to an NIL meeting. The injunction happened saying that you can't prevent this from anything happening, but they'd already made an agreement with the NCAA, and then they agreed to not appeal it, so they just had to take this, and 2 weeks later, it wasn't even against the rules anymore. So it's the dumbest thing ever. So if this has even hurt them at all, and I don't know if it has or it hasn't, but it just goes back to a very dumb decision by the athletic department to not go, hey, let's wait and see, because he drove him in a truck over there.
He cheated.
I know that there's people going on planes to do this, and that seems to be more expensive.
He should be out of coaching.
Well, it can't get any worse. So, let's see how much he actually helps, and if he can somehow change DJU into a better player, and therefore the rest of this offense as well. But I've had a lot of fun seeing all of the Cal fans. I'm sure you've seen it. The Woke Campbell and all of the funny memes and stuff from the Cal side of things as they get ready for this game and get ready to
the Calgorithm, as they call it.
Yeah, the Calgorithm of just all the nonsense, and I mean that in a good way, going on from Cal to FSU is something else. So, man, if they go and win that game on Saturday night, that would be crazy. But you know what? I don't think anybody's putting it past them at this point because of what FSU's done at this point.
Look, I would just tell everybody, get your lumps in while you can.
Oh, yeah.
Because this is going to be an alumni base and a administration that is going to find ways to pump so much money into this thing that this doesn't happen again.
I did think an interesting thought that, I wish I could remember where I first heard this, but there's some of the discussion during the offseason about, in the transfer portal era now, people still have this idea that you're going to be good every single year. Now, Georgia probably will be, but they've got every benefit known to man. Texas, most of the time, those teams that don't really have any weaknesses as a institution will probably be okay. But then again, not necessarily. So Florida State had a great team last year, and they lost a lot of players. And the argument was, how much did the snub make them go all in as though they were still at that level? So we just need to go get a quarterback and we'll be right back, and we're going to prove them wrong. And instead, so they were motivated by their bitterness of getting snubbed, when in reality, they should have just said, this next year is going to be a bit of a backtrack, but we'll regroup and we'll get it together. But because they got spurred, they had to get their revenge. And so, no, we're going right back, and it probably cost them this season and maybe even longer.
You have to have the foundation and I don't want to just use that word culture. You have to have something that is more than just the NIL. As that's the only way. You have to, like what we saw with Sarkisian. Texas has always had all of the bells and whistles. They always had a lot of the great recruiting, not every year, but it took someone to come in there and truly put it together, along with making players or holding players accountable and not being able to walk around with entitlement because they're playing at Texas.
You know what?
And then on top of that, NIL.
So the other night I couldn't get to sleep, and I was, I couldn't go to sleep, and I decided to watch Band of Brothers, which is absolutely fantastic, and I'm going to make this work. So one of the cool things about Easy Company is that they had this group, this core group that went through training together, that came up together, that from beginning to end of their fight in the World War II, even though they lost people, over and over again when new people came in, they, folded them in, but they still had the core of the people who ran up Currahee and did all those things together and built that. What FSU has done is they've built almost completely out of the portal, and they've not done as well with high school recruiting, so those Currahee guys aren't there. They're getting guys who come in later, and that's fine, but if you live by the portal, you die by it.
Travis.
Yes, that's
Let's
a big
put it
deal.
that way.